everyone once again. This is again for everyone online. It is the third edition of Local Talks this year. Local Talks is an event series that we run every year. Distracted. Okay, so Local Talks is a platform under the Localworks Foundation, which is a non-profit arm of Localworks, which is a design and based studio based in Kampala. And today's event is based on timber. It's called Building with Timber. And we are at a slightly different venue than we usually are. Usually we meet at our own practice workspace, but today we are at the Timber Innovation Center. And with me is James Tembo, who's the country director of this space, and I would like to invite him to share a little bit about where we are. Following that, I will introduce the speakers and we'll continue with the rest of the event.
Thank you so much. I hope the people online can hear me. A thumb would be good enough to give us the confirmation. James Tembo was already earlier introduced. We are at Timber Innovation Center. Allow me to take the honor to invite all of you and thank Localworks for choosing this venue. I think it serves the purpose of the topic. This building was set up in 2023. Reason because Fair Ventures is a tree growing organization, and we wanted to create markets and demand for the timber. But to do that, you have to show what majority of us believe by seeing or touching. And so we used laminated timber. All the timber here is from Usoga, made from pine. There is nothing that is imported. And again, this was to show that we have enough timber on the market that you can use to add value to and still put up something as good as this. This is the first building, and we also use it for learning purposes, and I've been receiving a lot of feedback. I would also encourage the team that is here, in case you see something architectural or engineer comment, make that comment so that then we are able to improve the next version of this kind of building. In this room, you are able to see how the roofing was done, how the trusses were made, how the ceiling is done, how the lighting is made, so that then we are able to see and give us all the type of the kind of feedback. We have a challenge with sounds because you're architects and engineers. I want to tell you the problem of the building, and maybe there is need to be someone with a solution. We have a problem with soundproofing. When we close it, then there is no wind coming in, and then we are sweating. So please, if anyone can come up with a solution on sound reduction, would be very happy to receive that. Thank you so much for coming again. I wish everyone a very good event. This hall is always open. If you have an event, feel free to come and utilize it because we want to show it to people. Okay? So if you have an event, it's always given out. When you have anything about timber and discussion on forestry, please utilize it. Thank you so much and have a good evening as we discuss.
Thank you very much, James, for that introduction and for giving us this space. I'm going to move now on to the speakers. We have 3 speakers with us this evening. One of them is online. That's Milan Heilmann, who will speak second. We also have Gaster Kiyingi, who's with us in person. And then we have a combination of Jesse Oduro and Edson Agume from Localworks. So to begin, the order of events will essentially introduce the speaker, give a short profile on who they are. They will speak, and then we'll do that for the 3 of them. And we'll collect questions and answers for the end. We'll have a short session in which everyone will be able to participate and ask questions using the chat, the Q&A, or you can ask in person for those of you who are here. So I'd like to welcome up Gaster Kiyingi. We give a very quick introduction. Gaster Kiyingi is the director of Tree Talk Plus. He is a committed advocate for tree planting, sustainable forest management, and wood use innovation. He's a strong supporter of FSC certification in Uganda and has extensive experience in the forestry sector, having worked with various national and international organizations. He's a consultant in forestry, but also environment and natural resources management, and continues to promote conservation, sustainable wood chain values, and climate change resilience. I'm going to hand over to him now for joining us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am humbled and a little bit surprised that I'm going to talk about responsible forestry through forest certification and the National Forest Stewardship Standards in Uganda. And I will do so in the presence of the group that is none other than the Director of Forest Stewardship Council, and Agasha. And Agasha, I welcome you personally and to this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, I chose this topic to speak to you about this topic because of the environmental values that it comes with it, as well as the social values that it carries, but also because of the business angle that it carries to us, the Ugandans. I am Gaster Kiyingi from Tweetalk Plus, and Tweetalk Plus is a non-government organization that is located in Tinda. I speak to you about Forest Stewardship Council because I might take you for granted that you know, but if in case you don't know, FSC is a non-profit organization that promotes worldwide responsible forest management for purposes of making sure that forests are managed in a way that preserves biodiversity, considering the flora and fauna, but also managed in a manner that meets community needs. That is in terms of forest products and services, but also in a manner that meets economic viability. It is widely recognized world over, and it is as a credible forest certification system. It has about 220 million hectares under certification, but also these are located in over 80 plus countries across the world. How does it work? It starts with the setting up standards, which are mainly the criteria, the principles and criteria for responsible forest management. It works through independent auditors who certify forests at companies to meet these standards. Forest certification certified products carry a certified FSC label, which ensures that consumers, that the timber is responsibly sourced, and other products, of course. And FSC balances environmental, social, and economic needs of forestry. The principles are quite. The principles are 10 in number, though the criteria varies in numbers. What we have to do in terms of being compliant, we have to see that we are compliant with the law, we are compliant with the indigenous people's rights, we exercise community relations that are strong and support local communities and their well-being. The forests should be managed in an economic, social, and environmental that meets social, economic, and environmental benefits. And as you can see in detail, you can read for yourself. FSC certification process is carried out in a very simple way. First, you contact the you contact the certification body that you want to take on the certification process. You go through an application process which you submit to FSC or to the assessment audit. You meet the standards that are requirements for FSC, and you undertake an on-site audit, and then that gives you the certification approval, and there you are certified. In terms of benefits, as I talked, I did introduce to you the concept of forest certification. It is enshrined in three aspects: the environmental, the social, and the economic. Therefore, the benefit that accrue to us as forest certificate, as people certified, are environmental, in that we safeguard the biodiversity, we safeguard our water, we safeguard soils, we safeguard ecosystems around the forest. For social, we promote community well-being, aspects of indigenous people's rights, and protects the workers, their payments. For economic, we protect we secure premium markets and enhance reputation and ensure long-term sustainability of the businesses. In Uganda, Uganda chose to join forest certification. We went through the global principles which we were introduced to, and using the national, the standard development group, we tailor-made the FSC certification process along Ugandan context. That is the forest ecosystems. We looked at the livelihoods, we looked at land tenure systems, we looked at cultural values and conservation challenges in general. And we came up with a document that its cover is displayed on the screen, and that was in 2018. We came up with that document, and now it is overdue for review, and the process is being the process has been started for the renewal of the stewardship standard for Uganda. In terms of requirements for the Ugandan stewardship standard, we seek legal compliance where we must comply with national laws, regulations, and international agreements. In terms of sustainable practices, we must comply with the ecological integrity that supports long-term social and economic benefits. In terms of biodiversity protection, we must safeguard Uganda's forest ecosystem, look at the species and habitats to ensure resiliency and ecological balance. In terms of community workers' rights, yes, we have the rights. We have to safeguard the rights. We have to safeguard their welfare. We have to safeguard participation of local communities, and workers must be protected throughout the operations. In terms of transparency and governance, yes, we should adhere to decision making. We should adhere to benefit sharing. We should adhere to forest management processes that must be accountable, that must be inclusive, that must be as well communicated. Who are the certificate holders in Uganda? We have basically 5 so far. I'm not aware of any others that are on board yet. We have the Uganda Wildlife Authority that is certified with the National Forest, Park, Rwenzori Mountain National Park, and Kibale National Park. That is about 200,000 hectares they got their certificate in 2022. We have the Uganda Timber Growers Association that applied for a certificate. Initially 6 members, but three took on the process of getting certified, and they are Luigi, Isabella, and Kirangwa plantations. This particular one, Uganda Timber Growers Association, demonstrates that even smaller growers can become members that can join together and acquire acreage that can qualify for certification. Busoga Forest Company, which has got a certificate of about 9,000 hectares. Chikonda Forest Reserve, which has got a certificate of about 12,000. And this 12,000 is both 80% natural and 20%, 80% plantations and 20% natural. We have the New Forest Company, which has a forest management certificate and a chain of custody. That's for the forest plantations in Kobende, Namwasa, and Chirinya. How can we get timber for this country? Mainly, we have exotic species, and we are now talking about eucalyptus, pine, teak, riparia that are common today. And all of them almost meet the same services and offer the same qualities, except for eucalyptus that people tend to convert into charcoal or generate biomass. The others are indigenous species that within that category of Azalea, Mysopsis, Mobile, Mahogany. But the problem is that they are rare species and therefore slow growing, therefore quite difficult to secure. But once you want to secure them, once you want to secure them, you should look out for companies that are certified, community forest enterprises, like groups or cooperatives that are beginning on forest management. You have to contact forest plantations, individuals that are carrying out commercial tree growing, and these are the main sources of timber. But you have to bear in mind that the procurement process is there, which needs to verification. Buyers should take proof of certification, where you should check on the verification codes for FSC, audit reports, in case you want to responsibly sourced timber. You have to do due diligence to ensure the suppliers comply with the forest law. You need to engage suppliers that work, that are committed to sustainable harvesting and replanting. You have to take the chain of custody at the back of your mind, track timber from the forest and to the final product to maintain the integrity of certification. The benefits I've talked about, the key timber species I've talked about. Now I talk about the challenges. The challenge of sourcing timber. The first challenge is we have limited supply of FSC certified indigenous timber. We have limited supply of FSC certified indigenous timber. While on the market, it's highly demanded, but in terms of sourcing, it is very little. Then we have high demand versus slow growth rate for indigenous tree species. When you consider mahogany, when you consider Azalea, maturity, to grow up to maturity, it requires substantial amount of time. Yet we are demanding for these species we are demanding for them urgently. There are cost implications related to certification of smallholders. Yes, the smallholders, we have not grown that. We have not grown enough base to attract certification for smallholders. I remember the time when we tried out about 2020, 2021. We tried to develop some mechanism for complying for the smallholder for certification, but these are still trials. We are still waiting to see if this is possible, but at the moment, the smallholders are somehow not certified. We have very weak laws, very weak enforcement of laws pertaining to illegal timber sourcing, wherever you go on the market, you will find illegal timber in the market. How then shall we acquire responsible timber when it is illegal timber on the market? Then we also, I also thought about, we have been talking about it, establishing a hub for certified timber. We looked for certified timber. Yes, we looked for it, but where do we get the certified timber? We only have to go to Sugar Forest Company or Green Resources, but there is no outlet near where, if I want one piece, two pieces, where do I go? That is a challenge to timber sourcing as far as this presentation is concerned. So in conclusion, to strengthen responsible timber procurement in Uganda, buyers should prioritize FSC certified sources, however minimal they are. We need to support community forestry initiatives that certify the timber. We need to collaborate with the private sector in order to invest in a sustainable forest management. To achieve this, we need to support FSC adoption, FSC certification adoption. We need to invest in sustainable practices. There's nothing that comes to you for free. And we need to choose FSC certified timber as the main construction timber that's going forward. Before choosing, we need to know where to procure certified timber for. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of my presentation. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and really focusing on responsible forestry. We had in our subtitle actually responsible forestry and green construction. And we wanted to target this topic from multiple different angles to really learn about timber from its sourcing all the way up until how it's being built with in sustainable ways. So our next presenter is online, Milan Heilmann. I feel like you could, there we go. He's sharing the screen. We will hand over to you to present, to have a small profile to share with everyone here as well. So Milan is the Managing Director of Super Timber 2000 and Head of Business Development at CPS Africa. His work is guided by two central pillars, technology and innovation, building local manufacturing capacity, and also developing future-proof urban communities through affordable housing development. He's passionate about making timber the material of choice for sustainable urban development and urbanization in Africa. And he positions CPS Africa and Super Timber as pioneers of circular carbon negative building systems that empower communities, create jobs, and open new pathways for green investment. It's very interesting, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, first question, can everyone hear me well? I guess that's a yes and a no, but I didn't get a response.
Maybe I said no, someone can't hear very well. Maybe
Okay, so I proceed. If it doesn't work, then you guys let me know.
No, it's working. Don't worry, it's working.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for this amazing introduction. I don't know, I don't think I wrote that myself, but it sounded quite nice. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Milan. As mentioned, I'm working for CPS Africa. We are basically a real estate developer from Zanzibar, Tanzania. But before I start my presentation, I would just like to say that I love Uganda, and I'm very, it's very unfortunate that I can't be physically with you guys, but I hope there will be some connections made, and we are, as a real estate developer, looking always at Uganda, Kenya as our next approach. So we know the availability of timber in Uganda, so we're very excited to share a little bit our experience, what we believe has to be done, and I think this is the good way to start my presentation. Yeah, so number one, I will give a short introduction on CPS, Fumba Town, and what we do. Then, of course, from our perspective, it's always one of the most important parts is giving context, right? Why are we doing it? And I just wanted to highlight that before I start my presentation, why we're doing it. We have a huge demand of housing all over Africa. That demand of housing is in the majority of affordable housing. So the majority is in the low income section. And number three, and most importantly, we must build these houses that are so huge in demand. We must build them sustainably. And as we all know, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, not so much, but will be coming. We all have huge amounts of forest trees, and timber is available locally, and we can create huge industries and jobs, and utilize the timber that's locally available to build these hundreds of thousands of houses that are in demand. And then I will shortly go into why timber is the solution for that crisis of housing. And at the end of the presentation, I'll have a short outlook, key points to take, and kind of a call to action. Yeah, thanks for inviting. And yeah, our mission at CPS is basically to create homes and communities that are strong, safe, sustainable, yeah, and as I mentioned, most importantly, accessible to all. Yeah, we don't want to exclude anyone. These communities that we are creating must be accessible and sustainable. These are like the two main key elements of our urban developments. This is just very shortly a picture of Fumba Town. This is our pilot and flag project here in Zanzibar. We have completed more than 1,000 units. We're sitting on 60 hectares. And to be completed in the next 10 years, we still have 2,000 to 3,000 units to be built. We're building already half of them with timber, half of them conventional. So we already believe we are the pioneers in East Africa in timber construction when it comes to volume and technology. Yeah, and now a bit of context. Why are we investing in timber technology in East Africa? Why does housing need engineered timber? And yeah, as I mentioned before, a bit of context. Africa's urban population is expected to double by 2050. By 2100, the major cities in the world will be all located in Africa. Just naming here Lagos, Dar es Salaam, and Kinshasa. I think Kampala is even when we look at the next chart, very, very much high in the same direction. Yeah, as I said, East Africa is among the fastest urban regions in the world. This is just a graph on the urbanization that is like currently the major cities are currently located in Asia, but by 2100 the majority of big cities will all be located in Africa. Again, now the next context is the demand for affordable housing is increasing rapidly. Yeah, we have already an existing backlog of 2 to 3 million houses per each country. So Tanzania has 2 to 3 million, Kenya has 2 to 3 million, and Uganda, I don't know, I don't have the specific numbers, but I believe it's very similar. We're talking already a backlog of 2 to 3 million houses that are currently in backlog. Now, considering the population growth of 2 to 3% per year, we're adding between 1.5 and 2 million people annually to the population, which basically concludes to an annual additional demand of 200 to 300 houses per country. Yeah, and what, in terms of context, yeah, these millions of houses that are in demand, I think most of people know, but I think I just wanted to highlight that the majority, when you look, this is an income pyramid from Tanzania. They're very similar in Kenya and in Uganda. It just shows that 80% of the entire population households have an income below $1,000 per month per household. And usually East Africans spend like roughly 25% on the income on housing, on rent, or on paying mortgages, etc. And that basically means, looking into that amount, we're talking about houses and affordability between $7.5 to $15,000 per house, and that paid over a period of 10 years. And as we all know, banks and financing are very limited, so we really need to come up with more innovative finance solutions on how to crack that affordability problem. So now that context on, number one, a huge demand of housing. Number two, the majority of that huge demand of housing leaves us with a kind of a crisis with who is building these houses, number one, and number two, how are we building these houses? And I think in that context, one of the key points that most of you, I hope, know, but I just wanted to mention it, the current construction methods obviously are not sustainable. Roughly 30 to 40% of all construction and its related industries emissions are coming from... Hello, you guys? Can you still hear me? Yeah. So like 30 to 40% of all carbon emissions coming from construction and construction related industry. So we really need to change. Is a background noise. Okay, I'll continue. So basically, as I mentioned, 30 to 40% of all carbon emissions are coming from construction and construction related industry. So if we want to build these hundreds of thousands or even millions of houses, we must change the way how we build it. Otherwise, we might solve one problem and building hundreds of thousands of houses that are huge in demand, but at the same time, we are like killing the planet by building conventional concrete and steel houses that are not sustainable in terms of carbon emissions. So we really need to change how we build. And of course, as I mentioned, timber is the solution, a sustainable building solution, and we have the opportunity to create an entire industry from the tree to the house. Yeah, as we have huge availability in forestries. We need to change the way we build. As I mentioned, massive demand, climate change. We have really the huge opportunity on local supply chains that we can build these houses with entirely locally sourced timber. And we must change really and move from construction to production. That means basically we must produce these houses in a factory because we need to scale it, right? We need to build not 10 houses, not 100, not 1,000. We need to actually build hundreds of thousands of houses. So we need to scale it. With scale, we can reduce the price with economy of scale, get it to an affordability point, as mentioned. And clearly, we do not compromise on quality. This slide shows very shortly, I'm not going into that because the time is not enough and it's the Tanzanian context. But this is just the southern highlands of Tanzania from 2013, quite a long time ago, but I guess that hasn't changed a lot, with roughly 257 hectares of pine and eucalyptus. Just as a note from my previous speakers, that Busoga Forestry has currently under their management in Uganda 9,135 hectares of I think registered forestry. Just as a comparison, there is huge availability on forests and timber in our East African context. Yeah, some might have heard about it. We are actually building the highest timber tower in the world. We are in the final design stage and kicking off construction early next year. But I just wanted to say, like, that Burj, which is the highest timber structure at the moment worldwide, will have approximately 4,000 cubic meter of CLT, and that 4,000 cubic meter of timber regrows in a single day in the Southern Highlands. So we could sustainably build 396 of these towers per year sustainably with just a regrowing amount of timber in the Southern Highlands, not considering the existing stock. Yeah, coming to the next point is basically a bit the supply chain and how it works. What are the key players from the tree to the house? So number one, we have obviously the forestry, the sawmills, and yeah, just highlighting what my previous speaker mentioned about really certified forestry, that the off-taker have security on quality and standards. So number one, we clearly have the forestries, the sawmilling, where the material is coming from, which is basically the source of everything. Then number two is at the moment the missing link, but I'm coming to that with Super Timber 2000. The missing link is actually the manufacturer, the processor, who can take the sawmill timber and process it into engineered timber. Thirdly, some of you might have heard about Volkshaus. Volkshaus is our contractor here in Fumba Town, who is building the timber houses. And clearly also mentioned earlier, one of the key points is always the off-taker, which in our part is us. The off-taker determines the quality of the timber, determines more off-take, and basically strengthen the entire industry. For today, I'm not going into the financing. That's not so much fun for today. Yeah, so basically the missing link in our local supply chain is really the manufacturing and the processing, and that's really where we are currently establishing the first processing facility in East Africa for engineered timber. It's the first production line for structural timber, for glulam, and in the addition of phase 2, also a CLT production. And we're anticipating to produce 3,000 cubic meters annually in the first few years. Our targets are quite straightforward, I would say. We want to start with our domestic demand that we have in our own projects. I will show a bit of numbers there in one of the later slides. But we would like, and that's really key, to expand to regional markets. We want to show not just in Tanzania, but also through East Africa, through Kenya and Uganda, and motivate and really push other developers and other players in the industry to build with timber and establish more of these processing facilities. So obviously we need collaboration really to scale the entire timber industry within East Africa. And our concept serves a little bit as proof of concept. So we're very, very excited, number one, but I think more importantly, we are very keen on sharing our experience with the industry throughout East Africa. So we ideally can duplicate the approach that we're having currently in Zanzibar towards Kenya and Uganda. Yeah. Next one is changing perception, timber as a super material. I think here most of us know, but I just wanted to mention it. Timber often is perceived as a low quality material, right? The skepticism exists regarding durability and structural integrity. So what we really need to push for, and that also is kind of the call for action, seeing is believing. We really must demonstrate the advantage of timber construction. We must showcase successful projects and engage communities, policymakers, and investors to build confidence in the timber solutions. And yeah, obviously, I live myself in a timber house, and I would not change that because timber is just a beautiful, beautiful building material. And it has all these advantages. It is regrowing. It is carbon sequestering. As I mentioned, we have really that huge advantage. It's locally available. It's fast growing, especially in our regions. I always use the comparison of a pine tree in East Africa grows to its let's say to its full capability between 15 and 20 years. The same pine tree in Europe takes 60 to 80, up to 100 years. Of course, we do know there's different characteristics and structural strength in that different growth, but still we have that availability, and with engineered timber we can really reduce that difference in strength. It's empowering, and yeah, it's a natural material, right? So everyone who has been in, I mean, you guys are sitting in a timber building. Not sure how the smell is, but it should actually be quite nice. You feel the timber once you are exposed to it, right? You smell it, and it's much better for our well-being. Yeah, I think the next part is not so interesting for you guys, but I just wanted to highlight shortly a few of our projects that we have developed and that we have built with timber, and obviously also that kind of highlights the entire demand and demand of engineered timber that we have. This is a project called The Soul, which is one residential resort on the east coast of Zanzibar, where we have built 250 apartments, and the majority, more than 120 of them, are all still built with timber. I would show a video just before I end my presentation. Here, just the numbers. So the total demand for engineered timber here is 6,000 cubic meters. The next building is our JJ buildings in Fumba town. We're building 4-story engineered timber buildings, JJ, they're called JJ, with roughly 36 apartments per building. This is the first building that is entirely built with timber from Africa. So the timber comes from South Africa. Yeah, I think it's the first multiple-story building built entirely from African timber and from Africans. Let's say it that way. Here as well, the demand for the engineered timber. Then we have also different products, more middle market products, Moyoni. Not going into the details. Here you see just the current demand and the increasing demand of here we have GLT, structural timber, and CLT. So basically in 2025, which we are almost at 3,000 cubic meters of demand. And by next year, we're already hitting the 4,000 cubic meters in demand. So the demand is here. Of course, we need more developers. We want to increase that demand, so we get more investment into processing facilities. But yeah, just again, call for action. We really need to invest in timber processing and housing. We need policy and regulatory support for sustainable timber use, especially certified timber, as mentioned a few times. We need really partnerships for scaling industrialized timber construction. And we want to really make timber as the future of African housing. I think that's key. Just before my last slide, I think it should work, but let's see. Okay, before I started, this video is now 3 years old. So the entire project of 250 apartments by now is completed. So the video is quite old. It's 3 years, but I still like it because it's the first multiple-story timber building that we have built, and it's very beautiful. Oh, no, one more time. Okay, yeah. So my last slide is really, I've taken a workshop that we have done like 2 years ago here in Fumba with the universities of Tanzania, the forestry partners, and I think I mentioned it, but like really the key points to success for the entire industries are collaborations and partnerships. Number 2, clearly education. We really need to change that mindset of the majority of people and the perception of timber, right? We really need to showcase the beauty of timber, how we built it. Just showcasing, seeing is believing, putting timber into educational systems much more precisely and much more efficient. And of course, a lot of research and development needs to happen. We need to really check the species that we have available, the strength, and how we can do the engineered timber. And of course, the entire industry needs standards and norms. We, as an off-taker, we need a certain quality and a norm that the forestry is basically following a norm and certain standards. So we, as an off-taker, can really ensure we get the right quality. And I think one last point I haven't mentioned here, but I see it more and more throughout the last couple of years, months, investments, right? Capital into such projects like the super timber, the processing facility, educational programs. We need much more investments into processing, how we build education, and that's definitely part of the key, but also, as most of us know, part of the biggest challenge. But anyway, I think we are on the right track to really make timber the future of African housing. And with that being said, thank you for the invitation. I hope I see some of you next time I come to Kampala, Uganda, and I'm excited to listen to the third speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Milan, for your presentation. I think, it's very interesting to see the work you're doing in Buba Town, and I'm sure it's quite new to many of us here. So I look forward to the next period of this event when we can chat more about it and ask further questions. So now we'll hand over to the next presenter. The next presentation is a partnership. We will have one presenter, and then he will be joined, I think, we've advertised Edson Agume, who is a director at Localworks and a structural engineer. And he will be joined by Gaster Kiyingi, who is also a structural engineer at Localworks. Both of them are very passionate about using all kinds of local natural materials, especially timber. So we've invited them today to share a bit about the projects, some of the projects and work that they do, but also experiences they have using timber in Uganda. So I will in fact have Jesse, who will be speaking, sharing the presentation.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Jesse Oduru. I'm a structural engineer at Localworks. And today I'd like to present on building with timber. I'm particularly focusing on durability, which is a concern that most of us will have when building with timber. So I'd like to first of all thank the previous speakers, Gaster and Milan. That was a very enlightening presentations that you put out there. First, let me just get back to what Milan was saying. He presented a very wonderful timber story. And I'd like to also start the presentation by just answering the question, why build with timber? And also give us some context. If you remember at some point, Milan talked about the housing deficit that we have. And he mentioned how in East Africa, most of the countries, Tanzania and Kenya, have about 2 to 3 million housing deficit of about 2 to 3 million. And in Uganda, in our context, our housing deficit is actually about 2.4 million as of last year. 1.5 million of those are just buildings that we need but we don't have. And 0.9 million of those, or 900,000, are buildings that we currently have but are just substandard. So there's clearly a demand for new buildings inside the country. And because of the rising population growth that you also highlighted, we know that we need to build these things faster, cheaper, and sustainably, and also, with top quality. So when we think about that, we have to think, what is the solution for this major problem that we have? So what I'm presenting today is that if we build well with timber, we can actually achieve the speed, efficiency, and sustainability that we need to have the housing deficit met. Why do I think that we can do this? First of all, timber as a material is one material that is strong. Structurally, we know timber can perform. It has a very high strength to weight ratio. For the same weight in timber, if you have the same weight of timber and steel, timber actually will have a very high strength. We also know that timber is something that is prefabrication ready. If you are to prefabricate with steel, there's a lot of connections, very complex connections, not impossible, very complex connections, very high level fabrication work that needs to be done. But with timber, we know it is simpler and faster to use. Concrete generally is a very heavy material. When we prefabricate with it, we know it will be definitely heavier than if we did with timber. We also know that timber is something that is low carbon, offers us the potential for carbon sequestration if we detail it well, and also adaptability on site. When we build with timber on site and there's a mistake, something you need to adjust, you can quickly remove the material and make adjustments on it. I mean, concrete is near impossible to do, right? So with these benefits that timber has over other materials, we know that if we harness timber, we can do a good job in delivering on that housing deficit. Something else that the earlier speakers highlighted was the fact that we already have a lot of sustainable timber that we're producing in East Africa. A lot of eucalyptus, a lot of pine is being produced, and we have the potential to use this resource that we have, when we use it to meet the demand, and then we're making sure that the renewable resource is promoted in a way. Just if you're curious, the building on the side, what is happening?
Time's over.
Let me call Randy. Let the time out. Yeah, I was just saying that those who are curious about that building that was over here, try and imagine it again. Oh, there we go. That is Eco Prefab, which is a prefabrication project by Localworks. It uses timber as well. It's prefabricated offsite and installed on site. The goal is to produce buildings quickly, efficiently, and sustainably. Yes, so as we talk about this, we need to understand durability, like I said at the start of this conversation. First, let's explore durability generally as a concept in building. Durability is basically the resilience of the building over time. It could be resilience of the building, or of a particular part of the building, a material in the building. And we know that there's a certain required level of performance. Let's say 100% is top notch. And then there's a minimum limit for the building to function suitably. When we build with a material or put a structure together, naturally, without putting too much care into it, it will degrade below the functional limit. But when we have a goal that, say, a building needs to last 50 years, we can make design decisions that allow our building to actually last within the functional range for all the time that we require the building to last. We can also see that maybe there are certain materials and certain structures that will be hard to just from the onset design to last that long. And we can decide to have an operation and maintenance schedule that keeps returning its performance back to the required levels. So there are many ways we can look at durability of a building. And those, when we think of it in that way, we know the things that we can do when we're designing buildings to make sure they last. So let's now go to timber itself as a material. When we're using timber, we want to make sure it's durable, we want to make sure it lasts over the time that it's required. So it is important that we understand timber decay and deterioration. One thing that I want to kick off with is just fungal agents and insect infestation, something we're all familiar with. We know that timber gets attacked by insects, gets attacked by fungus. Fungus causes timber to rot. And the reason why it causes timber to rot is it wants food which is the wood lignin. It wants oxygen. It will create food from water, oxygen, and a good temperature range. And then the wood lignin is available, and all those conditions just are perfect for fungus to grow and to consume all the wood that we have. In fact, a moisture content of more than 20% is enough to start supporting fungal growth in the wood that we have. Beyond 20%, up to 30%, it's super dangerous. Wood is saturated, and it will just rot away. So yes, we require a lot of wood. We require the wood to have these conditions for it to be affected by fungus. We also know that insects will attack wood, especially in our context. Termites do a lot of damage to wood. What we might not know, or we may know, is that when wood has already been attacked by fungus, it offers the opportunity for insects to actually also come in. So when we're really looking at if there's a perfect moisture condition, fungus attacks the wood, softens it and allows insects to just come in and bore through the wood. So we're seeing everything just building up until the point when we have a structure or a material that's completely destroyed. Another thing that really affects timber is ultraviolet radiation. When we expose timber to UV light, it's going to be damaged, the chemical structure is broken down, and we see this discolorization that many of us, I'm sure, have observed in wood that is exposed. We also have, it's even the combined effect of having moisture and having UV all on a piece of wood, on an exposed piece of wood, is that we have this cyclical thing that is causing the wood to swell and shrink, and then we end up with cracks, we end up with warping. So these are also things that we want to think about as we go to build with wood. How do we, counter these things that are against wood? Another durability aspect of wood is fire. Now, the relationship of timber and fire is complex, but sometimes we also misunderstand it. Naturally, we're all thinking when a building that is built out of timber is set on fire, we expect it to just burn down, perhaps even faster than, say, a steel building. But that is actually not the case. Wood, naturally, when set on fire, it burns, and the first few layers of the wood chars. And when it chars, it insulates the rest of the layers of the wood and protects the rest of the layers that remain. So there is a very big opportunity, actually, for us to design timber so that it chars off, and whatever remains is still structurally, useful to us. You get. So that is something I would describe as a predictable behavior for wood under fire. Other materials are not so predictable. Steel, for example, will just warp and bend at high temperatures. At elevated temperatures, immediate warping and bending. And if you have a building out in steel, when there's a fire, it's going to fail. But if you have a building like this one with a lot of depth, for example, and a part of it burns off, we know that it will char and leave a certain depth that if the structural engineers have considered can still hold the building. So yes, the relationship of timber and fire is often misunderstood, but it is not the worst. Okay? So let's talk about the strategies for actually building durably with timber. I have sort of summarized them in 3 things. We want to think about picking the right species. We also want to understand that we have the right protection or treatment for the timber that we have. And then we also have to think about the right detail as designers who are prepared to deal with timber. So let's talk about the first part, species selection. There are certain species of timber that are very naturally durable. They won't get attacked easily by insects and fungus. They will not, under exposure to UV, degrade very quickly or very badly. We also know that some of these, when you're exposed to UV and moisture, the warping and all of that is, minimal compared to other species. Most times, these are hardwood species that have grown for long that provide this level of durability. One example that we've used on many of our projects is teak. We know that teak is a very durable material, and we often use it for highly exposed timber. And you're probably wondering, why don't we use it everywhere? You know, it's very durable. The thing is, it's mostly hardwood. It grows, takes a long time to grow, so it's very expensive to procure. So there's always a trade-off when we're considering the species to select. Most times the species that are the most durable are really expensive, and we have to understand that trade-off, discuss it, and detail accordingly. So when in most cases, we end up building with eucalyptus and pine structurally, and then detailing to make sure it's safe. And then in areas where it's highly exposed, that is when we run to find this durable material that is more expensive. So species selection is critical. We can make the right choices at the start to ensure that the buildings are durable. Number two is wood treatment. When we are using a material like timber material like eucalyptus and pine, we can treat it against fungus and insects. When we do this, we guarantee that the treatment in the timber deters these insects. When they come to feed, some of it, trying to remember the chemistry of it, but maybe we'll get back to that later. Yes, but what it's going to do is either, the food that the insects or the fungus is looking for is going to sort of bring a barrier against that. And then we know that we won't have this infestation growing in whatever timber that we use. So right now we use DOT, which is a boron-based wood treatment chemical. We also know that there are other wood treatment chemicals, but they are known to be more toxic, things like CCA. So we use DOT as a wood preservative. When wood is treated using DOT, it's usually dipped or applied on the surface. But dipping, we know, allows the treatment to really go through, penetrate all the depths of the wood. After treatment of the wood on site, we can verify that it's well treated. The reagents that we can use, cutting a piece of clean timber, and then applying the reagent and seeing that, just like here, we can see the depth that the treatment has gone through. This is fully, the treatment has gone through the full depth of the timber, but in cases like this one, it's not complete, and we can make good decisions on whether our timber is suitable or durable. So apart from wood treatment, we can also detail for durability. So this is our part as designers. We have to think about how do we keep out all those agents of deterioration, like water, especially moisture, and then the insects, and UV as well. So there are many things that we can do. But in all cases, we're trying to keep moisture away. So by just elevating the timber above ground, we stop the damp from moving from the ground to the timber. You can see in the first figure over there, we have that timber piece that is just detailed to hang above the floor. Something interesting to note is in this detail is that angled foot of the bracket is actually designed to deter termites. Just by angling it like that, we know that termites have a hard time trying to move at that slope. We also, in the second image, you can see us elevating the wood above the rest of the structure. Something else that we can also do is encapsulate the wood within behind plaster. In this case, on our projects, we use lime plaster, which is also known to deter fungus, deter insects. So one thing you're really noticing from here is that the many detailing, we don't detail one thing, we detail to try as much as possible to deter all these agents through many ways. This is another example of what we're doing on a project. In this case, this is the foot just after the ground beam. We installed a saw plate to keep the wood elevated again and provide a barrier for any ground moisture that's coming towards the wood. In this case, it's the window sill that we have set in place just before we start the wood construction to make sure it's sloped to allow that water to spill off in case any moisture lands on it. And also generally it's acting as a barrier to any sort of termite movement that is trying to happen there. Another thing that we do is seal all our wood. when wood is exposed to UV or moisture, want to keep it sealed, want to make sure that moisture also does not get in. A good practice is to use breathable sealants that still allow the wood moisture vapor to move in and out of the wood. Timber wants to naturally regulate moisture, and you don't want to block it off. You want to seal it off entirely. So using a breathable sealant like linseed oil on exposed timber is good. And also providing generous overhangs to protect any wood that is exposed is something we can do. Just keeping out the moisture, keeping out UV. These are all detailing decisions that we can make, combining all of these together to make sure that the wood is protected. This is eco prefab again, which is a good example of a culmination of all these ideas that we will bring together for durability of buildings. The prefabricated timber panels are brought to a site that we have already built the ground beams, the foundation for. And when we're installing the panels, we're elevating it above that ground, the initial ground construction. And then the panels are filled with lime blocks and then encapsulate the wood within lime plaster. And on top of that, we then paint over with earth pigmented lime plaster, which allows us to still that breathability of the timber that is encased, but it's also offering the protection that we need. And yeah, that is it. I think that if we pay attention to durability, if you're a designer, you're thinking, how do I detail well for durability? And then you're trying to source, you're trying to specify the right species, and you're also trying to source material that is well treated, checking on site, make sure in quality control that you have something that's treated well and will stand against this. We will build well with timber. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse, for that presentation and all the detail you've shared with us. I think it's been interesting to have completely different perspectives on timber, and hope everyone has enjoyed the presentation. We will now quickly move into a Q&A. So you're welcome to ask questions. There's some people who have already asked a few questions in the chat, but I think from our audience, we could gather a few questions. And in the meantime, I will ask Jesse, Edson, and Gaster to join us at the front, and Milan to turn on your camera. Turn the camera around so that those online can also see a little bit. Perfect. So I think anyone in the audience would have some questions. That's the mic.
Thank you. Interesting presentations. Shame surprise that to be in this space. I strongly believe that each of our housing has to be timber. There's no other way. My question or my concern, and something I'd like to open for discussion, I don't know whether there can be timber houses without carpenters. I think one of the challenges that we really need to think about is how can we be able to make such skills commonplace. I don't know whether they can have to be introduced as simple carpentry. I remember in the olden days, there used to be cookery classes in primary schools and secondary schools so that we get these skills in early. Because what I have noticed is that the enrollment to vocational schools for carpentry has fallen. But somebody is saying it's phased out. What does that mean for us who are thinking about building out of timber? I'm sure most of the guys in Localworks are not going to pick up hammers and start implementing these projects themselves. So that's something for us to think about.
Thank you very much. I think I'm the one who was, my name is Sanyu, that's Uganda. I'm the one who was looking to share as in, I think on the projects we're working on recently in vocational institutes, we are realizing that the carpentry side of the vocational training is being phased out. I really don't know why, but it looked like they thought that on the apprenticeship side it's being handled. I don't know. But my question goes to Mr. Kiyingi. You might have mentioned it, but I think I might have missed it. What is the acreage for people who require FS? Because you are talking about smallholders and then those who are, I guess, big enough. So what is that acreage that somebody must have in order to be able to apply minimum certification? And then this is also just in the organization that the FSC, or is it, I don't know, that what is your position, or what is the general position held on timber entering the country from out of Uganda? Because it seems like we might have quite a bit of timber that then makes ours less available on the market. We've heard about roads being built in Congo so that timber can be brought into Uganda. So what is the position as far as that's concerned?
Let's take one more and then we can.
Good evening and thank you for the presentations. Really insightful. My name is Judy Mwanga, Rebuilding Capital Uganda. I'm a strong advocate for local materials, but I am an advocate. I always look for the framework and to do with the regulatory environment in which you're operating. So my question goes to, first of all, the issue of pine. You didn't speak on pine. Somebody else spoke on pine specifically. My question is that pine is not indigenous to Uganda. My understanding is it is not. And as such, its scaling up has to be managed in a particular way, not to affect biodiversity, not to affect the local ecosystems, but not so. How are you actually going to manage the situation to ensure that it doesn't display the unfavorable aspects of growing pine, which is impact on water, impact on the local biodiversity, and the rest of it, which can go into detail if you want me to. But I think those who grow it and those who know of it will know what the problems are. Should I go into the problems that it poses? That's the first question. And then the second question has to do with the issue of aligning the use of cross-laminated timber, which I think is what you're talking about when you're talking about construct, and making sure that our regulatory sort of frameworks are up to date, aligning what you're intending to do with what we already have on the books. How is that being done? Has it been done, or is it to be done? And if it hasn't been done, how would you intend to ensure that whilst we have wonderful case study projects, if you're going to scale that use of timber across the general populace, how do you make sure that fire and safety is taken into consideration and all the other issues which are coming to play?
Right. Well, let's answer those 3 questions first, and then we'll take more afterwards. The first one is on timber.
Try first to answer that question. I have more qualified people in the audience who may answer that.
Milan is back on the for everyone in the room. Then other questions, I hope you've heard all 3 of them, but you're also more than welcome to respond rather when you have.
Yeah, when the question was asked, I remembered a part of Milan's presentation where he talked about a gap. The second stage that Super 2000 Timber is trying to fill, and it sounded like it's the similar gap that we're talking about here with skilling. I don't know if he sees any, similarities or some reason why he chose to fill the gap with an actual company that's doing something like
that. And I've had that question.
I heard the introduction of the question. I didn't hear the question though.
So Milan, the question was that we can't do timber without carpenters. And in our country today, some vocational institutions are even phasing out carpentry as a subject to study. And I noticed that in your presentation, you highlighted that there was a gap in the procurement process, and you filled it with I keep forgetting whether it's Super Timber 2000. That's it? Yes. And so I was wondering, was that also as a result of a skills gap? And do you think that the solution is more people doing something like that?
So, okay, well, I would say Super Timber 2000 is not so much on the skills of a gap. It's more like the technology, because as you know, we are building multiple story houses. So at some point we need the structural and the engineered timber. So we need the structural timber, we need the CLT, we need glulam. So this is at the moment all imported from Europe, from South Africa. So as we see that we have the timber locally available, we said it is like totally senseless to import timber from Europe while we have the timber in front of us. And what are the missing pieces? And as that's kind of the missing link in terms of technology. And I think it basically translates to a much wider and broader problematic that we have in Africa when it comes to, okay, we have the resource available, but we actually don't have the manufacturing or the processing facilities next to the resources, and we sometimes we harvest the resource, the timber, and then we send it off, or we sell it off in such a low quality or low pricing because we don't have this manufacturing processing facility. So it's kind of a technology gap, but obviously intending to create jobs and to really have this entire industry from the tree to the house. But I wanted to, because also it was said in the first question, what I wanted to highlight and emphasize on is when it comes to the skill sets of the people. Of course, this is always the key and the ground of everything. Yeah, we can't build even a single house without the people, right? So where I always go back and I say we need to go back to the source, and the source are basically the kids, the future, and we need to go back to the educational system, to the schools, and teach and showcase again the beauty of timber, how that timber is not a less of quality material. And once we have that convincement with the kids, I think the other parts will kind of automatically and organically follow, because once really the kids are convinced that timber is a cool product, then this carpentry again becomes much more attractive, right? And we can train again carpentries, and not just carpentries, but we need the entire spectrum in that entire supply chain, from the forestry. How do we manage sustainable forests? And I guess this is a good transition to one of the questions when it came to pine as a non-indigenous tree. Yes, we are, I think we are all aware that pine is not an indigenous tree, but we need to also understand that certain species are cultivated as a crop, right? So we are cultivating pine as a crop. So we know that we are harvesting it after 15 or 20 years, but at the same time, it doesn't mean we can't do it sustainably. We were actually invited last year to Sweden, and we saw huge sustainable pine tree forests and how they're being managed. And it comes to the soil biodiversity, how the management of the soil is being kept intact, right? How are other species of trees implemented within a pine forest to make them more resilient towards any danger from beetles or whatsoever. So there's a lot of methods we can look to different markets and environments which are much ahead to East Africa. But really, the going back to the source, I think, is one of the keys. Going back to the schools and making sure the students are being well educated in terms of the superior material of timber.
I have 3 questions, but I will answer 2 and request Madam Anna Agasha to help me answer the question on the acreage, the certifiable acreage for FSC certification. Not because I don't know, but because you can put it, you can articulate it better than me. Timber entering this country. First of all, there is a lot of timber coming in, but most of the timber goes out. So Uganda is only a transit route. The timber that comes in here eventually finds its way out, especially that which is of high quality. The high quality timber, that premium timber, actually comes in this country and leaves this country to unknown destinations. But that percentage of timber that comes in it is not intended to distort our market, because Uganda as a country charges a certain percentage of the revenue that comes in. Actually, even that timber that transits to other countries, they charge a 1% on total revenue at revenue costs, revenue collection centers. That does not rule out the aspect of corruption. But otherwise, we are supposed to charge 1% of that revenue, total revenue, per the amount of timber that comes in, irrespective of whether it stays or it goes out. The timber that stays mostly is illegal. When I talk about illegal, there is a classification of illegality. First of all, it is the way it is converted using power saw. That is the first instance against which it is disqualified and graded as illegal. So illegal timber that comes in this country is enormous. The first grade process and goes out of this country. The second grade, the one that comes power sawn, is what actually distorts the market here. We have instilled revenue collection centers to stop but they somehow allow that illegal timber to come in. What can we do to the illegalities pertaining that coming in? We have forestry officers, we have NFA in charge, we have every person in charge of revenue collection. What can we do? This is the country in which we are. We see the illegalities, we allow it, and this is what it is doing to our growth, economic growth. Pine is not indigenous and not adaptable to the local conditions. Yes, it is not. But earlier studies, earlier than the SPGS, the Soil Production Grant Scheme project, SPGS 1, SPGS 2, carried out a study, and I'm privy about the acreage. Carried out a study, and against which we are planting pine in this country. But as of now, we have not met the requirements for that acreage. We have only planted a small proportion compared to the proportion that SPGS study recommended. So there are no worries as far as carrying on planting with pine, given that we are actually harvesting now. Even we are harvesting juvenile timber, for your information. So I really think I am part of those that think planting of pine does not affect this country in any case. But I am a little bit sort of, I carry reservations about the planting of eucalyptus. Eucalyptus, the acreage, I think we are going above the acreage that is recommended. We should be now cutting down on the planting of eucalyptus. Unfortunately, or fortunately enough, it is also getting down. The trends are showing it is getting down. People that cultivated, that grow eucalyptus are cutting eucalyptus, replacing it with coffee. You know, we have a migratory behavior when a crop picks on the demand, we rush to join that crop. So when the growing of eucalyptus took over, everybody rushed to grow eucalyptus. When now we have coffee, the growing of coffee is now the thing. Everybody who has eucalyptus plantation, they are cutting down that eucalyptus to plant coffee. Please wait until cocoa takes over, then the coffee plantation will be cut down to establish. But what this raises a very interesting question going forward. How long shall we keep changing the crop as if we are not professionals, as if we don't have advisors, as if there is nobody in control? It is a challenge to this country. Now, the third question, Madam.
Take the chance to stand and stretch a bit. Thank you very much. Thanks for this important meeting. I will take the chance also to introduce myself. I'm Nagasha, and I work for the organization that Gaster presented, the Forest Stewardship Council. It's global, and I work in Africa. I'm Deputy Regional Director. We have a director as well, based here, Dr. Ede. So to the question, and good to see you, Milan. Stay quiet. So the question of what is the acreage that can be certified? Any acreage can be certified, but there are 3 key elements that Gaster Kiyingi talked about. Environmentally appropriate, it has to be socially beneficial, and it also has to be economically viable. So can 1 acre be economically viable? Maybe not. However, as Forest Stewardship Council, we know that. And so we've designed packages that take care of such small acreages. And Gaster talked about it. One of it is what we call group certification. So if you have 1 acre and another farmer of trees has 1 acre, you come together and you can make 1,000 hectares or even 20,000 hectares, and you certify as a group. You have 1 manager of that group, and then you can sell your product of trees when you have it as certified. That way, it makes economic sense because there's pooling of those products. So I will leave it at this to stick to the question and respect the time given. Thank you.
I think the final question that maybe wasn't touched on was a bit more about regulatory frameworks that exist and how laminated timber might meet them, if they're there. If not, maybe one of you could share on that. Just to get some. Oh, okay. All right. Maybe we will take a few more. Or Milan. Milan, would you like to comment on that? I don't know. Essentially,
yeah, just a little bit of reference. I mean, when it comes to regulatory framework on how to build, clearly in Zanzibar we do not have. But I think what's quite important. I mean, we have sold 1,500 units to international clients, so there's a certain expectation, not just from the clients but also from ourselves, that we follow international norms when it comes to timber construction, right? So when we work with the consultants, the structural engineers, the architects, we must follow international norms. Of course, we at the moment we are using the Euro code. Also, we work with the Technical University of Munich, which is basically the leading institution in Europe in terms of timber and timber construction, and they're basically having their own department on structural timber, and they are setting or changing the norms. So we're working very closely with them. We have sent pine from Tanzania to Germany to be tested. But yeah, I think just to round it up, like we don't have at the moment a specific code in Zanzibar that we must follow, but it's very crucial when we build commercially in scale that even if the code is not as per the country code existing, that we follow international standards.
I think maybe we will take 2 more questions, if that's okay, from the audience.
Ready to start?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm really happy to be here. I actually didn't know that something like this exists. So it was a surprise to me when a friend shared with me. My name is Collins. I'm a structural engineer. And I'm also a timber researcher at Cambridge University. I have a few questions, especially for Milan, and also a lot of concerns. I've been using timber for quite some time, and we've had some issues here as a country. But I think having seen how Milan has advanced in Zanzibar, I think they have moved a little bit, some steps further, because for them they are now moved from local construction to more of a mass timber construction, and that's my area of focus. So when I was deciding to do research on timber, I had a lot of questions. First of all, our timber here is not graded. Like we don't have standards upon which we can work with the local timber. So it's usually a challenge for us to use it. But also we have no policy frameworks upon which we are supposed to work on timber. One of the questions usually is that we have potential for sustainable forests, because, for example, the question that I had for Milan is, you're doing mass construction, mass timber construction. One of the key things about sustainability is you to be able to have sustainable forests. You know, I always say we have to be careful when we talk about sustainability, because it's not just about what people like saying sustainable, but we have to look at the parameters that make sustainability. One of which is energy efficiency, the production of these timber species, this structured timber, the process through which it goes to produce the energy required. But also, we have to look at how easy it is to plant this timber and be able to manufacture it and use it for local construction. So I wanted to ask Milan, how far have they gone? Because I wanted to do research on timber strength, trying to determine the strength of the local species, especially the species that take a very short time to grow, because this is the main focus. If you have, we know the structural properties of species that don't require a long time to grow, then we can have enough supply of timber to construction. But also, I started thinking about the policy framework, and I decided I'm going to work on multi-objective optimization, design efficiency, life cycle assessment, in form of seeing what is the effect of the whole construction on the timber that is available. So I have a question for Milan in that line. How have you managed to do this? And also, what is your plan on avoiding to import timber species? Because, you know, one of the key things about sustainable construction is you have to use materials that you have at hand. If you're still importing more materials, then, you know, you cease to be, I would say, largely sustainable. So have you looked into that? And also, coming here, I didn't know that something like this exists. I want to urge the people who organize these events to start tapping into universities. For example, up to now, I think since 2006, we only have one single study from Makerere University about strength properties of timber that is locally available. And also, the study was done on just rare species. They didn't do studies on timber species that are commercially available. So I think on events like this, we should be approaching universities, also inviting them here, so that in case we have issues, maybe students can tap into some of these things and do research projects on them, through which you can get some information. There are so many issues with timber. Even as I entered here, I realized there are vibration issues. So this is also an issue that needs solutions, because the timber flows have those sequences of vibration, sound, and all that. But in areas, for example, where I've worked, like I've been outside countries, some of these problems are solved through universities. If you have a problem, and then students can be able to, study on it largely because they have the resources in the universities, and then they provide solutions. So I have a lot to say, but I think I'll skip there. That's one more request. I would like to get in touch with Milan, because my research is being funded by Cambridge Trust, and it's regionally based. I'm supposed to study in the region as a precursor for policy. Because my main objectives is to one of my main objectives is to create a policy upon which timber construction can be made. So I would like to request Milan, if there is a way I can get in touch with him and work with him, I will do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I would just, on the universities, we have some Makere, I think, in front, right? Here, so they're representing and can take back that feedback. And we do hope more universities will join us in the future. And Milan, maybe if you could respond to some of, or we could take the next question and then come back.
I think I can start responding.
Okay.
So before I go into the depth of what you have mentioned before, what I always say, and I mentioned it even in my presentation, seeing is believing. So I encourage everyone or anyone who has a stronger interest in seeing a bit more commercial timber construction and scale to invite you guys to come over to Zanzibar. It's, by the way, there's a direct flight from Kampala to Zanzibar. I've taken it myself. It's very convenient. I really would encourage people or whoever has that interest to come over to Fumba Town or to Zanzibar and see how we build. Okay, so like we have built more than 500 units completed with timber. You see the beauty, really, the beauty, the preciseness, the smell, and everything that is beneficial, what I mentioned. You can see it with your eyes. And also you can see some of the conclusions, or basically what, sorry, I didn't get the name of my pre-speaker, in terms of water as an issue, fire resistance, like all of these topics, how we have tackled them, how we have implemented certain regulations for that in the building. But one point I wanted to add is, of course, we must analyze and see the building in its entire life cycle, right? You mentioned it yourself. So it always starts with the supply chains. Where do we get our materials from? Unfortunately, we are sitting on an island, so we have to import the majority of our materials. And we don't hide things. Like I just, as an example, as I mentioned, the timber, the structural timber, we still, because we have not yet, Super Timber 2000 is not yet running. We're establishing it at the moment, but basically that is subsidizing all the imports of timber that we have currently. That's number one. Number two, when it comes, for example, to the insulation, we are buying rock wool from Germany, which is kind of insane. We are buying windows and doors from Turkey. So just that as a kind of a baseline that we have currently, how we build. We doing a lot of research and development in localizing these supply chains, right? We want to establish our own manufacturing for processed timber, for producing our own windows and doors. We are doing at the moment research on insulation, on cocoa pit with limestone. So key is always, okay, what's your benchmark and how can you improve and localize your supply chain? Because you become much more resilient and to any disruption from the outside, the moment you can really localize your entire building materials. But of course, that is easier on a small scale, right? Because if you just build a single house or a few houses, you find these solutions. But we are building in scale with thousands of units. We need to follow certain fire regulations, soundproof. So it becomes more complex. The more complex it becomes, the more higher the cost is in terms of research and development and innovation. And as you can imagine, companies like us, of course, we are very much willing to do that, but it always comes with quite a substantial amount of cost in terms of the research and development that we are investing, but we also limit it, right? We don't get grants from any institutions to say, now you localize your entire value chain, supply chain. So it comes with its challenges, but I think the mindset is one of the most key points, right? Like we want to localize the supply chain. It's a long way, but the moment you have determined that as one of your key goals, you can quite substantially and focused working on that. yeah, that's
Hi, my name is Diana Sekaja. I'm an economist and specifically working on education planning. I have two questions. Okay, just a comment. One comment on the carpenters. Of course, there's a mismatch between the educators, so the people who are planning the education system, and then you people, the practitioners. So definitely you know what's going on out there. You're predicting the future. You see the benefits of timber. But if you're not speaking to the people designing the curriculum, I know that there'll definitely be that mismatch. In our technical schools now, we're still focusing on making chairs and tables, which is now being replaced by plastic. So there's need for more discussion and to actually do policy notes and bring the right people in the room that can make those changes. So I have a question on, two questions. One, I was curious about why you're sourcing timber from South Africa, whether it's the treatment, it's the processing, why not from Tanzania or Kenya? Because you gave the statistics on the number of the acreage. And then two, have you done an evaluation, maybe to the second or third presenter, on the cost of production using timber? For me, as who's not a builder, vis-a-vis using the traditional, brick and all that. So what's the cost comparison, maybe per square meter, as a point of advocacy, why we'd be advocating for the use of timber? Thank you.
I can answer. I'm not sure it wasn't entirely. Okay, so I'll just go ahead because so number one, we get the timber from South Africa from MTT. That's basically the manufacturing processing company. So what they are doing, they are buying the sawn timber, pine, eucalyptus, from the South African forests, and then they process it, right? So they produce CLT, glulam in their factories. That is basically that Super Timber 2000, what we want to do locally. So we kind of replacing our imports with our own production. And then secondly, no, what was the second question?
It looks like I think most of the questions have been answered by the answers. Now, built apartments with both systems, I think you will have a much better comparison, though it may not apply here. Here in our case, our case in Uganda, there's a lot of variation of construction. What you mean by local construction? If it is roadside brick, only have because it is a little bit difficult to compete in cost. Yeah, concrete block. An engineered concrete block, I think the timber was not, I think our evaluation shows that the timber wall construction is slightly cheaper.
No, I just want to comment on carpentry skills. Carpentry skills, yes, they dropped in earlier years, just as every other skill about forestry went down over the years. But now, when you look at Nyamira Forestry College, there is a little bit of revamping of the trainings in Nyamira Forestry College. There are new entrants in Nyamira Forestry College who are enrolled. There is also a little bit of money starting to stream through from FAO. FAO has a project with the Solo Production Grant Scheme, particularly on what is it called? Dealing with the value chain towards the end. I forget the naming. That deals with the conversion of timber and the like. So a little bit of more numbers is going to be trained, is going to be skilled around carpentry workshops. And carpentry skills will start to go up. At the moment, there are few people who appreciate what carpentry is all about. I know a handful, really. I can mention 2 or 3 people that have the capacity to talk about timber as carpenters. That skill will be slowly but gradually brought up to scale.
Thank you very much. I think we unfortunately will run out of time because the venue is closing where we are in person. So we're going to have to wrap up. We had a number of questions online that were really interesting about where we use timber, about research, all kinds of things. And it feels as though this conversation could keep going for much longer, and we will try our best to make that possible. But thank you to our speakers for joining us this evening, Milan, Jesse, Gaster, and Edson. Within the room, you're welcome to stay for a few more minutes. There's some snacks and drinks outside, and then we hope to see you at our next event. We always have that. Our last one is typically in December, so you're more than welcome. We'll share as much as information as always. The event has been recorded, will be uploaded for further watching, comment, conversation, and the contacts will be shared, I think, as well. So thank you very much, and good night, everyone.